Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. I wasn't expecting anything that night. Not the way the air would shift as I walked past the kitchen, not the way my heartbeat would suddenly stumble when I saw him leaning against the counter, eyes darker than usual. It was supposed to be an ordinary moment, just me passing by, barefoot on the cool tile floor. But the second his gaze caught mine, the space between us turned charged, like the whole house was holding its breath. Before I could say a word, his hands were on my waist, warm and certain, pulling me closer until the edge of the counter pressed against the backs of my thighs. I gasped, partly from surprise, partly from the way his breath brushed my ear as he leaned in, close enough that I could feel the slow, steady rise and fall of his chest. Then, without warning, he lifted me onto the counter in one smooth motion, as if he'd been planning it all along. The cool marble kissed the back of my legs, and the sudden closeness made my breath hitch. He didn't rush. He didn't speak. He just stood there, between my knees, hands resting gently on either side of me, his thumb tracing slow, teasing circles against my skin. And then he smiled, not the casual, familiar smile I knew from 100 mornings over coffee. This one was different. It was deeper, heavier, like a secret he'd been keeping. A smile that said he'd been waiting, and now, the waiting was over. The silence stretched. Our eyes locked. My knees shifted just slightly apart, not a decision, more like instinct, and his breath caught at the same moment mine did. The air between us grew warmer, thicker, as if the walls themselves leaned closer to listen. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the soft rain against the windowpane, and beneath it all, the low thrum of my heartbeat echoing in my ears. Everything else, the world outside, the passing hours, faded away. It was just him and me, and the unspoken pull that was about to change everything. And just as his fingers brushed the edge of my hip, as if testing how far he could go, he leaned in closer, and stopped. Right there, on that breathless edge, the night held its secret. The space between us felt like a living thing, humming, tightening, pulling us closer with every stolen breath. He hadn't moved an inch since leaning in, yet somehow the room seemed smaller, warmer, like the walls were closing in just to keep us there. My heartbeat thudded against the quiet as his hand brushed the side of my thigh, so light it could have been accidental, but it wasn't. I drew in a sharp breath, and he noticed. His eyes flicked down, then back to mine, and something unspoken passed between us, a question, a challenge, a promise. His fingers lingered just a moment longer, tracing an invisible line that left a trail of warmth in its wake. It wasn't bold. It wasn't rushed. It was the kind of touch that said I know exactly what I'm doing. The clock on the wall ticked softly. The rain outside deepened. And there we were, suspended in that strange, beautiful tension where everything meant something, a shift in breath, a glance held a second too long. He leaned in again, his lips hovering near my ear but not touching. "You have no idea," he whispered, his voice low and rough, "how long I've wanted this." The words sank into me, deeper than I expected. My hands, almost without thinking, slid up to his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart beneath my palms. He drew closer, until his breath fanned across my skin and I could smell the faint trace of his cologne, familiar, comforting, intoxicating. Every inch of space between us vanished. His knee brushed gently against mine, then pressed a little further, urging them wider without a word. My breath caught again. His hand followed, resting at the small of my back, steady and sure, as if anchoring me in a storm. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then his forehead touched mine, soft, deliberate, and the world fell away. No words, no noise, just the pulse of something inevitable thrumming between us. The air was electric now, charged with everything that hadn't yet happened but might in the next breath. And as his lips drifted just a fraction closer, not touching, just hovering, I realized we were right at the edge. One heartbeat away from crossing a line we could never uncross. The air had grown heavy, not just warm, but charged, thick with everything we weren't saying. His forehead still rested against mine, but now his breath came slower, deeper, as if he were trying to steady something wild beneath the surface. My hand stayed on his chest, feeling the quiet storm building there, each heartbeat louder than the last. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, barely audible, as his fingers skimmed the edge of my waist. But neither of us moved. We just stayed there, suspended on that fragile line between what we should do and what we desperately wanted to. Every shift of his body sent a ripple through me, the brush of his thigh against my leg, the ghost of his breath sliding across my cheek, the gentle weight of his palm pressing into the small of my back. He wasn't pulling me closer, not yet. But he wasn't letting go either. And that in-between, that exquisite hesitation, was somehow even more intense than if he had. I swallowed hard, my breath catching as his nose grazed the side of my jaw, not a kiss, not quite, just a whisper of what might come next. My fingers curled slightly against his shirt, betraying me. He noticed. His lips curved into a faint smile I could feel more than see, a silent acknowledgement that we were both fighting the same losing battle. The kitchen light threw soft golden shadows over us, painting every small movement like a secret. His thumb traced slow, deliberate circles at my waist, slipping just beneath the hem of my shirt. My breath hitched again, sharp this time, and the sound seemed to break something inside him. He exhaled deeply, a low, shaky breath that said he was hanging by a thread. We hovered there, trembling on the brink. My knees shifted, pulling him just a little closer, and he responded instinctively, not stepping forward, but leaning in, as if the gravity between us was too strong to fight. Our lips were a breath apart now, neither daring to close the distance. The world narrowed to that single, suspended moment, two people balanced on the knife's edge of surrender. And just when I thought the space between us would finally disappear, he stopped again. Not because he wanted to. Because he had to. For now. The air felt combustible now, like a single spark could set everything ablaze. We were still frozen in that fragile almost, our lips a breath apart, but the tension was no longer quiet. It pulsed through the room, heavy and alive, in every shallow inhale and shaky exhale we shared. His hand slid higher along my waist, fingers moving with a patience that was almost torturous. They paused just beneath the fabric, hovering there, warm against my skin but not venturing further. That restraint, that maddening restraint, made the space between us feel even more dangerous. My breath caught, and I felt his chest rise sharply in response, like the sound alone had undone him. "Do you feel that?" he whispered, voice barely steady. His forehead pressed harder against mine, as if he needed the anchor. I nodded, or maybe I just swayed forward without meaning to, and that tiny movement shifted everything. His nose brushed against mine. My hands slid up his chest and around the back of his neck. His breath grew uneven, warm and unguarded against my skin. We were unraveling slowly, piece by piece. Every accidental brush of fingers, every tiny shift of our bodies was louder now, more urgent. His thumb stroked lazy, teasing patterns across my side, drawing invisible lines that made my pulse stutter. My knees, already parted, opened just a little more, and the movement pulled him closer, until his hips brushed the edge of the counter. The contact was fleeting but enough to make us both still. His jaw tightened, and I felt the faint tremor of his breath as he exhaled near my ear, shaky, deliberate, fighting for control. "If I stay here another second," he began, but the sentence died in his throat, unfinished, heavy with everything he couldn't say. Time seemed to stretch thin. The world shrank to the space between us, a heartbeat, a breath, a choice. His lips hovered impossibly close to mine now, so close I could feel the shape of every word he wasn't speaking. My fingers tangled lightly in his hair, and that was it, the last barrier slipped. We were right there. On the edge. Every nerve awake. Every breath a question. And in that charged silence, the next heartbeat would decide everything. The space between us had vanished, almost. A breath. A heartbeat. That was all that separated his lips from mine. My fingers tightened around the back of his neck, and his hands pressed more firmly against my waist, no longer hesitant but still holding back just enough to drive me mad. Every second stretched thin, trembling with the weight of everything we both knew was about to happen. And then, a sound. A soft, unexpected click broke the silence. The back door. It was subtle, but real, and both of us heard it. We froze. Our breaths collided in the narrow space between us, but neither of us moved. The rain still fell softly outside, but the rhythm of the house had changed. There was someone else here. He didn't step back. He didn't even look away. His jaw tightened, and his eyes locked on mine with a different kind of fire now, something protective threaded through the hunger. Slowly, deliberately, his hands slid from my waist to the edge of the counter, as if bracing us both. "Stay here," he whispered, voice low and rough, but I caught his wrist before he could pull away. I didn't want distance, not now, not after everything that had built between us. "Don't," I breathed. "Don't move." The air pulsed. His chest rose and fell against mine, and even though logic screamed that we should stop, neither of us did. If anything, the interruption made the moment sharper, more dangerous. Like the world had just reminded us that what we were about to do mattered, too much. Footsteps. Faint. Somewhere deeper in the house. They weren't rushing, not trying to hide, but they were close enough to make every nerve in my body spark. I felt his pulse under my fingertips, rapid and unsteady. He leaned closer, his lips ghosting the corner of my mouth without touching. "If we stop now," he whispered, "we won't start again." The truth of it hit me harder than I expected. Because he was right, this wasn't something we could half finish. We were already too far gone, too tangled in the pull that had been building for months. The interruption didn't weaken it. It amplified it. Another step. Closer. My breath came in shallow bursts, torn between fear of being discovered and the wild, dizzying need to see what would happen if we weren't. His hands gripped the counter tighter, and his body pressed just a little closer, a boldness creeping into his movements now, as if he'd decided that if we were going to be caught, we wouldn't regret a thing. And yet, even now, he stopped just short. His lips hovered near mine, his breath hot and uneven, the weight of the unknown pressing down on both of us. Were we alone? Was someone watching? Did it even matter anymore? The world beyond the kitchen felt distant, unreal, but the world between us was on fire. Every inch of space hummed with the risk, the temptation, the sense that one wrong move could change everything. And as the next footstep echoed down the hallway, we stayed locked together, trembling, breathless, and utterly unable to step away. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped just beyond the kitchen doorway. For one breathless second, the world froze. The rain, the hum of the fridge, even the beating of my heart seemed to fall silent. I should have pulled away. He should have stepped back. But we didn't. Instead, something inside both of us snapped. His lips crashed into mine, not soft, not hesitant, but hungry and desperate, as if all the restraint of the last hour had shattered at once. I gasped against his mouth, fingers tightening in his hair, pulling him closer until there was no space left between us. The kiss was fire and gravity all at once, bold, consuming, unstoppable. Every breath, every small sound we made was louder in the silence, and with each passing second, the world outside that moment mattered less. His hands moved with new confidence, sliding around my waist, lifting me slightly as he pressed me deeper into the counter. My legs instinctively wrapped around him, pulling him closer, grounding us both in the storm we'd created. We were lost, completely, trapped in the pull that neither of us had the strength to fight anymore. And then, a voice. "Thought I'd find you here." We tore apart, breathless and wide-eyed. Standing in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame, was her, the last person I expected to see. The expression on her face wasn't anger. It wasn't shock. It was something far more dangerous, amusement. I wondered how long it would take, she said softly, stepping into the warm light of the kitchen. Her gaze flicked from me to him and back again, a knowing smile curving her lips. Now I have my answer. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel his pulse racing under my fingertips. The night that had felt so private, so hidden, had suddenly split wide open, and yet, instead of shame, what I felt was something stranger. Something that made the air even hotter, even more dangerous than before. We didn't know what she would do next. Leave. Stay. Join. The story we thought we were writing had just shifted beneath our feet, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would be the same after this. The silence after her words felt louder than the rain outside. My breath came fast and shallow, his still tangled with mine, both of us frozen, not from fear, but from the shock of being seen. And yet, as she stepped closer into the kitchen light, something shifted in the air. It wasn't judgment that lingered in her eyes, it was curiosity. Understanding. And maybe, beneath it all, something that neither of us dared name. He was the first to move. His hand slipped from my waist, not pulling away but grounding us, steady and sure. I felt his heartbeat begin to slow under my palm, the wildness of a few moments ago softening into something deeper. I followed his gaze to her, expecting anger, but she only tilted her head, as if weighing a decision that would change everything. Secrets don't stay secrets forever, she said finally, her tone low but not unkind. And now that this one's out, what are you going to do with it? The question hung in the air, pulsing with meaning. My eyes met his, and in that shared glance was an unspoken answer. We weren't running from this, not from what had happened, and not from what it meant. Whatever storm we'd stepped into tonight, we were stepping into it together. Slowly, he reached for my hand. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like a promise. I took it without hesitation. Her lips curved into something that might have been a smile, faint, knowing, and not nearly as disapproving as I'd feared. Then I suppose, she said, backing toward the doorway, I'll let you figure it out. And with that, she was gone, leaving the three of us suspended in the aftershock of everything that had just happened. The house was quiet again. The rain softened. And in that hush, he leaned close once more, his forehead resting gently against mine, as if grounding us both. The fire that had been building all night was still there, quieter now, but no less real. And as his breath brushed my lips again, I realized the story wasn't ending here. It was just beginning, rewritten in ways none of us had expected. And maybe that was the most thrilling part of all.